As I said in the beginning, two wonderful, I want to say peppers because I just feel like both Michelle and Zoe have been around PEP for so long, and it's just so great to have them on a double bill. So our poetic opener is Michelle Poirier Brown, and again, sponsored by the Writers Union of Canada. Michelle is an internationally published poet and performer living on unceded syilx territory in Vernon, BC. She used to live here. So we like that.
Nancy, I just realized I got that wrong. It's the League of Canadian Poets.
Pardon?
It's the League of Canadian Poets, not the Writers Union. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
That's my fault.
Okay. League of Canadian Poets is sponsoring Michelle. Michelle is Cree and a citizen of the Métis Nation. Her debut book of poems, You Might Be Sorry You Read This, was published in 2022 by the University of Alberta Press, and her chapbook, Intimacies, was published recently released by Jack Pine Press. Her poem, Wake, won PRISM International's Earle Birney Prize in 2019. The song cycle, The Length of the Day, Jeffrey Ryan composer, premiered in 2021. Michelle's work has appeared in Art, CV2, the Greensboro Review, Grain, Emrys Journal, Vallum, and several anthologies. A feminist activist, Michelle won a landmark human rights case establishing reasonable accommodation in the workplace for breastfeeding women. Yay, Michelle. Now retired from careers as a speechwriter, conflict analyst, and federal treaty negotiator, she has taken up birdwatching. Please welcome Michelle Poirier Brown.
It is so good to be back among friends. Thank you. I want to mention the chapbook, Patrice. The chapbooks are going like hotcakes tonight. And I mentioned Patrice because, Patrice, I would like you to stand up, please. Patrice is the designer of today's chapbook. For those of you that aren't familiar, Jack Pine Press is a publisher. They do just chapbooks, but your chapbook has to have a little something to it. Often it's photographs, often it's just design elements. This particular book has 14 poems and 7 photographs. And I think that if I hadn't had Patrice to work with, I don't know how far we would have gotten down the publishing line, but it's Patrice's touch that has really made the book what it is. So thank you, Patrice, and it's really good to have you here. Intimacies draws from poems. I think the oldest poem in this book was written 40 years ago. The most recent one was written just a couple of years ago. And it's all about relationship. There's one poem that I may read tonight. Hang on, I need my... I get 8 minutes.
10.
So to figure out how to organize the reading for tonight, I decided that tonight's poems would be only the poems about women. And they're not in any chronological, I'm going to read them in the order that they are in the book, but they're not in any particular chronological order, so you can't make any assumptions that who these poems are about. I'll mention for this first one that I used to have a job in Vancouver and a family in Victoria and commuted back and forth. And even after I went into medical retirement, my husband and I settled in Victoria. We still maintained a condo in Vancouver. This poem is called The Affluence I Want to Mean Nothing. I sleep in a box of air above red maples, now in leaf. A glimpse of sea beyond the towers. We value our proximity to cheap sushi, street life in the West End, neon lights, boutique shoes. The urban cottage, our pied-à-terre. I want nothing to divide us, not the miles beyond the mountains, nor the blind of silence. I want to feel your dust aloft above the grain fields, blown against my face. The background on this one is that the word adore has its deepest roots in Latin from ad, to, and orare, speak or pray. So good. Not just any so good. So good the way you say so good. The way you close your eyes and sink into your breath. The way you weep with me when I am happy. So good the way you greet your animals. So good the way you greet your tea. It's infatuation. It always is. That adoration of that I fall subject to and moved to speak, adore, which explains the singing. We speak of daughters. We navigate our lives in view for accuracy, direction, test everything for art. Marvel at the willfulness of hair, healing power of yellow tulips. This poem isn't about two women, but it depended on two women in order for it to be written, and I love it so much I included it. The prompt for this poem was 2 lines taken at random from a pile of lines. One was, I want to sleep in you, which is from the poem Iron Hedgehog in Talking to My Body by Anna Swerd. And the other is My Bright Ambiguous Grief from The Way in Clea Roberts' book, Auguries. And it's called I Want to Sleep in You. I want to sleep in you, find my way to the haven your ribcage shelters, lie in the soft pillow of your left lung, the roar and swoosh of your heart, reassuring and familiar as the steel mill a block beyond my childhood yard. And in that soft chamber, lay aside my bright, ambiguous grief, its teeth sunk in my throat, its breath breathing me. Untitled. You wouldn't believe me if I said, I loved you when I first saw you below me on the stair. Ever since, I have been learning how not to. And the last one, and thanks for the extra minutes. This is new medium. Sometimes my hands feel like pain balloons on the ends of my arms. Sometimes I just want to write you a sentence like that. Or a sentence that tells you my mind feels like a flag on a stick someone is waving, and I wonder if what I am writing is a collection of similes I could send out on Twitter, and if I'd be able to face the absence of no followers. Then I wonder if my new medium is writing random email to you in the middle of the night, a book of poetry, emails to SE in the middle of the night. You seem to love me increasingly. The more I adopt a take me or leave me attitude, the more you take me. Sometimes I wonder if I betray you and I don't trust you, or if you know I don't and you love me anyway. Or you know you can't be trusted and that I love you anyway. And I wonder if that sentence would be more accurate or less if I removed that. Or if it is more or less accurate.
Wow, thank you so much, Michelle. That was so great. You're just such a performer, and I love hearing and watching you. Thank you. So are there still books left?
Mm-hmm.
Through two books left. So hurry up. Well, don't hurry up now. Just wait till we're done. And now I'd like to introduce our featured reader, Zoe Dickinson, AKA our artistic director of PEP. Zoe, also thanks to Rhonda for sponsoring Zoe. Zoe is a poet and bookseller from Victoria, British Columbia, right here, right here. This is why we're here. Her poetry is rooted in the Pacific coastline with a focus on local ecology and human relationships with nature. Her first chapbook, Public Transit, was published in 2015 by Leaf Press, and her second chapbook, Intertidal, Poems from the Littoral Zone, is the 2022 winner of the Raven Chapbook competition. She's manager at Russell Books and artistic director. I've already said that. So I couldn't find, I like to follow Zoe's, her way of introducing someone, which is to pull out some words they've said from an interview, but I couldn't find any interview. So I pulled something from your Poets Caravan, which is, she says, I think that's one of the important things about getting out into your local environment and getting to know the animals and birds that live here, because then the stakes for you when something threatens them are so much higher, and you really feel what it means for something like that to happen. Please welcome Zoe Dickinson. The dog.
It's so funny. If we get stuck on something, even if he could pull it out, he just stands there and looks at me. And then sometimes, oh, sure, if you want. Yeah, thank you. That would be great. Oh, is it? We've been like cut off this whole time. I hope not. No. Okay. Good. I live in fear of accidentally decapitating someone when I set up the laptop. Hello, everyone. Michelle, you blow me away every time I read one of your poems, and when you perform them, especially. Oh my God, that was wonderful, and I'm so honored to be reading with you tonight. I was secretly really glad that the timing, someone else was going to read tonight, and then they had to move their reading. And I was like, yes, I'm stealing that right now. And thank you to everyone on Zoom. I see my parents. It's about 11:30 for them right now. So thank you guys. Happy birthday, Mom. It's my mom's birthday. I also just really wanted to thank my partner, Chris, who, the elusive C, to whom this book is dedicated, who introduced me to the Pacific Ocean and who I love very much. Okay, so the first poem I'm going to read, the longer that passes since I wrote this poem, the more inadequate it feels, which is kind of the point of this poem as well. And I'd like to start with this. I'd like to start by acknowledging that this poem is being written on the unceded territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I have no idea what that means. I have the luxury of continuing to live my life without understanding what I've stolen. I'd like to start by acknowledging that my life takes place where someone else's life should be happening, that where my apartment building sits, someone should be gathering camas bulbs, but instead, not far away, she is boiling water before mixing her baby's formula. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I fit perfectly into this long, slow genocide, this machinery so silent that I was born and raised on top of its invisible back without ever hearing the sound of people dying, the sound of people rising, protecting, fighting. This machinery can't stop killing, cradles my body as precious, but when I'm not in the room, bullets just slip out, as though death is a natural byproduct of keeping me safe. I'd like to acknowledge that I don't know how to live here without doing harm, but I don't want to live anywhere else. I'd like to acknowledge that every day I make the choice to live on this land, and I'm saving my money because one day I'd like to buy a piece of it, even though I know it doesn't belong to the current owners, even though I know we cannot begin to repay what we continue to take. I'd like to acknowledge that I mouth words of acknowledgement, like a spell to ward off colonialism, like a cloak to cover how comfortable I am here, living my life on top of an ongoing struggle for survival. I pronounce and mispronounce these words like a half-learned prayer, like an excuse, like a neon flashing sign that says, "It's not me, I didn't do it," as though saying it out loud will somehow make me less complicit. I'd like to acknowledge that this poem was written on the unceded territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples. Choosing to acknowledge or not acknowledge this truth does not change the fact that I live inside it. Every word that I read, write, think, and speak has the power to reveal or obscure it. And if poetry is a way of learning to know the world, then I want my poems to show this truth, not hide it. And if I'm honest, those are the only two choices. Don't mind Simon clapping. So I feel the more time that passes since I wrote this, the more I feel I have not done enough to back up this poem, which was sort of the point of writing it, but I'm working on it. The next poem is called Starfish, and it has an epigraph from the wonderful and inimitable Jan Zwicky from her poem Apple Song, and the epigraph is, "Red one, how strange the leavings of desire. Beloved, I mourn your raspberry collapse. Osmosis dissolves the purple echo until you might never have been. Water still as iron in rock's cupped hand. You were not a star, nor a fish. You ancient miracle of hydraulics, you collection of conscious currents, you linchpin You zipper, undoing an ecosystem with your death. You who could regrow from a fragment, unraveled in one day. You carried an eye on each bloodless arm, but did not see this coming. That poem is about starfish wasting disease, which has really decimated starfish populations up and down the coast. And fun fact, starfish do not have blood. They just use the water that's there. Yeah, isn't that nuts? Anyhow, so I spent a lot of time hanging out at tidal pools over the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, and that's where a lot of these poems have come from. And I have to admit, I am guilty of poking anemones. They feel so squishy, and they react, and it's so satisfying. So I just would like to apologize to all the anemones that I've poked in my life. This poem is called Anemone Advice. Stand still long enough to be mistaken for a flower. Paralyze them with their own assumptions. If you want company, tear yourself in half a few times. Get to know yourself through binary fission. Share your flesh with someone who can appreciate it. Invite something photosynthetic inside, like a dinoflagellate. Accept nothing less than symbiosis. Raise your limbs to the light. You can digest anything if you hold it in your mouth long enough. Snail, crab, apology. Spit out what does not serve you. No point in hanging on to someone else's shell. So I am a big mollusk fan, and I spend a lot of time thinking about mollusks. And my favorite mollusk, I don't know how many people have a favorite mollusk, but I do. And my favorite type of mollusk is the nudibranch, which looks kind of like that if you're close enough to see my tattoo. There's quite a lot of different types of nudibranchs, and they are colorful and a very diverse group of syilx. So this poem is called Nudibranch. Well, that's one way to deal with fear. Instead of getting harder, cast off the shell. Become all soft underbelly. Expose every bit of glowing skin and dare the world to take a bite. What is armor but participation with the predator? Uncaged by calcium, flesh leaps like flame, canary, tangerine, violet, luminous cyan. Extravagant ruffles of serrata, so translucent, bits of digestive tract are visible inside. The nudibranch takes a hydroid into its mouth, gently accepts the polyp's poison, saves explosive defense cells full of venom for later. Oh, noble sea lemon, cryptic nudibranch, dubious dorid, shag rug, moss landing aeolid. Oh, Spanish dancer called inkspot, glaucus, clown, fuzzy oncodorus. Teach me to be soft and inexorable. So a couple of people asked me to read, just a quick note, a couple of people asked me if I was going to read bookstore poems tonight, and I decided not to. I don't think they're quite ready, but maybe this book took about, I don't know, 5 years, so maybe another 3 or 4 years. There's not a lot of humans explicitly present in this book, but there are actually, most of the time, 2 humans sitting there on the beach. There's me And there was the elusive sea over there. This poem that I'm going to read now is, it's called Seashell, and it's kind of the backstory of this book, which is that I went and did my master's in Halifax, and it was very stressful and tiring, and various things happened. And we made it back to Victoria, and we got off the plane, and we dropped our luggage off at the hotel, and we went down to Dallas Road, straight off the plane, and just sat there. And we were just so happy to see the Pacific Ocean again. This poem has also an epigraph by Ophelia Zepeda, and the poem is Carrying Our Words, and the epigraph is, we travel carrying our words, we arrive at the ocean. For those on Zoom, my puppy's getting in trouble. That's what's happening here. We arrived carrying our silence, a shell of unsaid words secreted over years of surviving back to back against the world. We returned every day, resting in silence on a log, while gribbles carved tiny channels in the wood beneath us. Now, finally, we crack the old shell's hinges and find inside only the gleam of nacre. Now, finally, we leave our silence with the other broken shells on this beach, climb over granite to explore tidal pools. I pry loose a limpet. Under conical shell, a circle of soft flesh puckers, tiny mouth agape. I think it took us, I don't know, maybe a year or two of sitting there and staring at the ocean before we were fully recharged after that experience. Okay, so I think the next poem I was going to read. Okay, so I'm just going to get all the mollusk poems out of the way. Wait for time. I really meant to start a timer. Did I start my timer? No, I didn't. That's okay. This poem is called How Much of This I Carry With Me. In a jar on the mantle, my collection of old fears, blank shards of porous bone, shells eroded to the essential inner curve of the spiral. Mollusks taste memories to build shells, create chevrons and stripes in calcium carbonate. They'll never see their shells from the outside, never notice how much they've revealed. See, there, that break in the pattern where loss lies. Again, true story. They taste the previous shell to know what to do next. Mollusks are so fascinating. Okay, the next poem I'm going to read is called Barn Swallow, and I got very attached to our local barn swallows. They nest right behind our building. 1. Swallows begin all beak. Inscrutable sitters in judgment over the parking enclosure, lemon yellow mouths turned down at the edges, condemning my transportation choices. Open into wide daffodil throats that eclipse the nest when parents come to feed. As weeks pass, they overflow, untidy bird bouquet, adolescent bodies impossibly inhabit as little space as an egg. One day, the nest is empty, hollow cup of mud, but that night they return, crowd back in, not quite ready. 2, and the second part is a dialogue between me and the swallows. Me, who do you dance for? Swallows. Moths. Me, where are you going? Swallows. Here, again and again, here and here and here, hovering pinpoints of life spread in a constellation above the bluff. Connect the dots, dinner dance, every moment, here, here, every wing beat angled exact, going nowhere but here, and here, and here. 3. Swallows are fractals of form and function. Curvy wings and tail map flight paths full of swoop along the beach. Migration arc symmetrical as a pair of wings down the continent and back. This fall, I noticed their absence from my evening walks. Imagine them arriving in South America, equatorial air spiced with flying ants. I don't picture them dropping from the sky into New Mexico swimming pools, Wisconsin highways. Young birds just learn the knack of slipping past gravity, forget in a haze of smoke, fat reserves and muscle mass melt away, just feather and bone, should be lighter than air, but they're not. Feathered rain pelts carports and flower beds, hundreds of thousands, uncountable, unaccountable. Scientists collect bushels of hollow-boned corpses, each load impossibly light, impossibly heavy. The good news is most of our swallows did make it back the next spring. I was very relieved, but so many songbirds died that year. So I'm not huge on humans, and we don't really come off as the heroes in this book, our species. However, I do think that there's hope for us. And this poem is about that. It's called Hope for the Human Race. Mosquitoes live on nectar, alight on pin cherry blossoms, gentle as butterfly or bee, extract sweetness with needle noses, leaving no itch. The blood they steal does not sustain them. It's a selfless theft, desperate protein heist to gain building blocks for the next generation. The snow pool mosquito carries pollen in its eye from orchid to orchid, 1,500 feet above sea level. How the orchid changes the mosquito's view of the world. How the mosquito's gaze carries messages between flowers after dark. How human blood becomes a link in this ancient chain, and we, accidentally, nourish a constellation of blooms, is proof that even the worst pest fulfills a purpose in the ecosystem, despite ourselves. Okay, so I have, how am I for time? I think I have maybe 5 minutes. No, 2 minutes? No, sure. Okay, I think I was planning to read 10 poems, and that was the 8th one. So I'll do 2 more, and then I'll be done. The others are pretty short. This poem is called Swimming Up the Dark, and if you have not seen the seagulls do this on Dallas Road, or I'm sure the other beaches around here, I highly recommend watch them at a certain level of tide when they're feeding. It's one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen, and they do it a lot. Swimming up the dark. Seagulls troll the shallows, plunge heads below water, surface with wriggling gunnels, and swallow them whole. At first, it seems the meal is finished, one gulp. But the fish fights its way back up the gull's throat, swimming up the dark, feathered stream until narrow head protrudes from beak, writhing. A word not yet to be said. The hand of a swimmer going under. The gull chokes it back down, heaving with all the muscles in its throat, every feather on its neck a sleek hook hauling downward, and the fish sinks for a second time. Really weird thing to watch. I think the herons eat the same kind of fish, but their necks are longer, so you don't see the struggle happening. Okay, so I'm going to end with kelp, the kind of bedrock of so many ocean ecosystems. Laminarialis. Sea to sky bridge called kelp, mermaid's bladder, giant, bull, highway, fishing line, hose, ikiyama, kokwalot, bubbleheads bob, imitating otters who anchor sleep among fronds, infecting olive bulbs with playful dreams. Torn up by storm, tangle of broken ornaments, beached patchwork whale beginning to stink. Brainy holdfasts drag rocks up from the deep, grasp tighter as they shrivel. Each mummified cortex will never forget how it felt to be green. Further up the beach, a stray pneumaticist, round among round stones, once rubbery skin, tissue thin, still holds one small sip of air, produced underwater to lift photosynthetic blades sunward. If I crack the seal, take a breath of custom atmosphere, created by submerged cells dreaming an unknown sky, will I too gain the ability to float close to the light? Thank you very much. And thanks again to Rhonda for sponsoring me. I can't tell you how much that meant to me, and thank you for the vote of confidence.